Okay, good afternoon. We'll get started in a few minutes. Just doing some last minute checks on headlines and on the market. Looks like a lot of money went back into tech. We'll talk about that a little bit today. And I know people have been asking me what I was in. I like to say some of the stocks I'm buying or selling and why. And we'll talk about that as part of the context of talking about the market and how that's impacted by politics and the bigger picture overall. I'll get this mic in place and make sure everybody can hear me. Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Steve Mazzacane. This is the Steve Mazzacane podcast. We hope you had a great day so far today. It is 4:02 on Wednesday. I know I spent most of the day at Hornet's Nest, which is one of my clients, and we work on marketing and things of that nature. And we had a small company that does shakes and juices there today. And so I had some very healthy, they have these bowls, these like granola and fruit bowls, and these healthy shakes that were very good. Amy's, I forgot the name of it, but I'll mention it later on today. But they're excellent, and they'll be in stock there. They're at a few other places as well. We'd like to see small businesses, try. I know it's hard. It's a very difficult time. We're going to talk about the economics of the nation and the state as we go forward a little bit today. But I hope everything's fine. I'm sorry I was not live yesterday. As some of you know, I am taking some classes at Quinnipiac, and I am, with this election, so far behind. I'm getting a fly here. So far behind in many areas that I had to just, I started working and I didn't want to stop that momentum. And so I was doing business plans and a few things to hand in. So we're back now. We can talk and have a conversation. And it's been a pretty amazing week when it comes to the market. And we talk about the stock market because politics and the stock market go hand in hand. But oddly, very few people understand both sides of that. Most people who are politicos don't have an understanding of the market. People who have understanding of the market understand politics just enough of its impact on the market. And with the last 4 years in Trump, we saw an incredible impact on a regular basis where a politician can say something and do something that has a spectacular impact very, very quickly. And so as we talk about news, I think one of the responsibilities we have is to talk about that in a much broader concept. What do the actions of a politician mean? To the politicians who understand economics and finance, what does that mean? What motions or actions are they taking that could impact the market? And understanding how economics works is a huge picture. And are living in a world that's specialized. I'm into politics, I'm into finance, I'm into business, I'm into this. And we can't pretend that they're not all interrelated. They all mean a lot. And so we'll start off today talking about the appointment yesterday of Sean Scanlon to what is, I would argue, the most valuable or the most important committee in Hartford. That's finance, revenue, and bonding. And these are the guys who essentially decide what gets funded, how much money has to come in, and how it's going to come in. Now, it's a huge move up for Sean Scanlon, no question. It is I would say, a massive benefit for those constituents along the shoreline in the general area of Branford, Guilford, even Madison and North Branford, even if he's not the state senator, but in this district. And that's a good thing. From a political standpoint, it is not just a promotion for Sean, but it's also a new challenge because Sean Scanlon has worked on some things that most people agreed with. From a controversy standpoint, there was no controversy over some of his healthcare initiatives, getting insulin to more people. Ethan's Law it was bipartisan. There were some parts of that to appease the Republican base, but that was bipartisan. He's worked on some things that were not necessarily all that controversial. He has had healthcare plans that are more controversial, fall into the get more people covered type section. Republicans, Democrats will fight about that. But in general, he's incredibly well-liked. He's run the last few times unopposed. And he's, from a personal perspective, a very good guy and a very smart guy. I've had some very good conversations with him. He knows his stuff. And as much as he is, by all definitions, I think he's 32 or 33, but a career politician. I've made this joke before, but he was, passing Lego safety bills at 3 years old. He's a career politician guy. But I think his father was a police officer. He, I don't know that he, understands the in and outs of Wall Street finance, but I think he understands, and he's certainly smart enough to understand the impacts of the decisions that are made politically. That said, he goes into what he will now become the public face of taxes. That committee is the one who gets to decide how much revenue has to be raised and how it's going to be raised. And I don't care if it's him or anybody, going into this next year, we're looking at a situation where you're very likely going to have some sort of tax increase. Lamont says no. I don't know how you get around that. It's going to be 90% of the conversation in Hartford this next year is going to be about tax increases. Does it come in the form of sales tax increases? Does it come in the form of income tax increases? Does it come in the form of a more progressive means of income tax increases? So you tax the wealthier a little more, but maybe you give a tax break to those on the lower end of the spectrum. Those are the ones who need it the most. COVID has crushed the tourism industry. Most of those people in the tourism, restaurants, entertainment industry are not the highest paid people. So if additional breaks can be given to them while taxing the wealthier a little bit more, maybe a more progressive tax system makes sense. The way I like to state that, and we've said this on this podcast before, is essentially, taxes and income taxes should be essentially some sort of contract, a social contract that we make. And it's this: we all have services we're going to use. We're going to use roads. We're going to use police and fire. We're going to use state police. We're going to use our emergency services. We're going to use plows. We're going to use all those things happen. And while some are paid locally, some are paid by the state. The plan and the agreement that I would agree to, and I think most Americans would agree to, is that we'll provide all those services. And while you're early on in your career or business or what have you, and you're not making a lot of money, we'll tax you a very small amount. As long as, if you're one of the few who really gets ahead, and you're not making $60,000 a year, you're making $600,000 a year, or $1 million a year, or $2 million a year. Once you're in that category, that you're taxed at a significantly higher number. And most people in that lower area would say, of course. I'm 25 years old. I'm just getting started. I need all the money I can get. And I will gladly take more money now in exchange for, when things get better, when I'm making a lot more money, paying a significantly higher number to pay for these services and pay back for what I was able to build at a lower rate. That makes sense. That's the idea behind a progressive tax rate. However, what we've learned is if you raise that tax rate on the highest people by too much, in a global economy, the ability exists for people to essentially set up residence in another state. And we're seeing that more and more and more, that people are buying a second home in Florida, staying there for 6 months and a day, declaring residency there. They can still be in Connecticut 5 months and 30 or 29 days a year and not pay those tax rates. So how do you come up with a tax structure that brings in more revenue, which generally includes taxing those that have more money, without it being too high to the point that those people leave? That is a challenge now sitting in front of Sean Scanlon. And that's not a small thing. That's going to be a significant challenge, especially now with COVID. Now, we've had something very interesting happen in the last year due to COVID. And any real estate agent will tell you this. The demand for our housing has skyrocketed. While towns are likely facing additional costs, they may also be facing, if they're near a reval year, some additional revenues because the property values have gone up. I was going to look at buying a house this year. Everything's up 25, 30%. It's a terrible year to buy a house if you're a buyer. If you're a seller, you're in great shape. So you have this catch-22. You want to set a tax rate for the state that doesn't go too high to scare out the wealthy, while also realizing Connecticut's had a huge influx due to COVID from these towns that has brought in more income, more money, more revenue, more people with money to the state. That's the balancing act. When we talk about the economics and the political impacts, that's what Sean Scanlon does now have to figure out. So he went from handling issues that there was no significant opposition to. He could easily be a bipartisan guy because he was talking about things that were helpful. Let's get insulin to more people. No one's going to oppose that. Tax increases, people are going to oppose that. And my suggestion would be whatever tax plan, instead of looking at it as tax increases, whatever tax plan they come out with also includes lowering some interest rates on those lower levels. People pay a very low interest rate in the first $20,000 they make. Maybe we increase that to the first $30,000 while increasing the tiers later up. A more progressive tax rate makes sense to me. You still can't go over the states in our neighboring area. For example, our highest rate is still significantly lower than New York. So that's the challenge when somebody like Scanlon wants to move up the political ladder. They also take on a much more challenging role and the risk that he becomes the face of whatever tax plan comes out. Steve, will Scanlon change his stance on legalizing marijuana to bring in revenue? Steve, I hope so. I disagree with him on the legalization of marijuana. Did we see Oregon? Was it Oregon passed? Steve, you may know this. I'm responding to one of the comments. I'm going to look this up quickly. Oregon passed like a massive Oregon drug law. I want to see this now. No jail time for small amounts of basically everything, like including, I believe, heroin. And the mentality is they want to go after dealers and not people who are just users. Oregon has become the first state in the nation to decriminalize the possession and personal use of all drugs. And by the way, that was voted on. That wasn't passed in the legislature. That was a vote. Voters in the state approved Measure 110 on Wednesday. Expands access to addiction assistance and other health services, offering aid to those who need it instead of arresting and jailing people for drugs. I am all for this. It passed with 55.8% of the vote. That's a pretty significant margin. It makes sense. That is just, at some point, the war on drugs has been a disaster. It's caused more nonsense than it was ever worth. And to change that for people with small amounts, you want to go after the dealers, so be it. But to change that with people with small amounts and get them counseling and help instead is a drastic step in the right direction. I believe Sean Scanlon is wrong on marijuana. I believe Comey and Cohen would vote for it. And you now have a larger majority in the House. The problem on marijuana in any law, when the Democrats have this majority, and every Democrat will tell you this, and it's happening in the national level, the Democrats are so fractioned. And the Republicans are now tending to stay together. So on a national level, Republicans are staying on one side. Democrats, the left versus the moderates, are going at each other. And Biden's a more moderate guy, so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. On a state level, you couldn't get all the Democrats on the same page. So in our same areas, I think Robin Comey would vote for it. Scanlon would vote against it. And some people, I remember Ted Kennedy was absolutely against it when he was our state senator. I believe Cohen would vote for it. I don't know that for sure. We can get them on camera to answer that question. So I hope he votes for that. I hope there are some benefits that he sees. But in Guilford, which is most of Scanlon's base, there's an organization called Guilford Day, which in my opinion is a little over the top. They fought against even opening a marijuana dispensary in Guilford. They lobbied planning and zoning to outlaw marijuana dispensaries, even medical marijuana dispensaries. So sometimes you get these groups, in my opinion, that they manipulate kids to take a stance, which is nonsensical. And so that's what happens. And in those towns, you're sometimes governed by these small groups that have loud voices. The loudest voice in the room often gets the most attention. Kathy, if people didn't want new taxes and tolls, they should have voted for more Republicans. We got creamed. Yeah, we knew. I mean, listen, this is a blue state. It just is. Now, when it comes to governor, those are very close races, and a Republican can easily win. Do I think Stefanowski had a very good chance of winning the last race? I do. Do I think the idea of eliminating the income tax was anywhere remotely feasible? No. Had he come in with a little more logical plan, I would have said, maybe he had a better chance. At the end of the day, Biden's trucks only thing was nonsense too, but to eliminate the income tax was not something that's going to happen. So I think you get a Republican And I've said this before. A couple years back, John McKinney ran, and he ran on the Republican primary, and the Republicans went with Tom Foley instead. They went with the guy with the money. McKinney was the candidate. McKinney was the moderate Republican who would have been excellent. Everybody would have worked with him. But after Newtown, he voted for gun laws. By the way, Newtown was his district. He had to vote for that. And the Republicans went with Foley instead. A massive mistake, but instead Malloy got in there. You would have had McKinney. I think McKinney probably would still be governor had he won that race. He was the moderate conservative that I think the state would have responded to. Legalized heroin, yeah, that's in Oregon. Oregon is, as progressive as it gets. As blue as Connecticut is, as progressive as the state likes to call itself, we are backwards on sports betting. We are backwards on drugs. We are backwards on a bunch of the social issues. And, it's just because the Democrats can't get on the same page. Jonathan, sports betting needs to happen. Every state around us is getting it. We have 2 large casinos and legislatures refuse to pass sports betting. The problem with sports betting is those casinos and the deals made with previous governors with those casinos on who has the rights to sports betting. At some point, there has to be a solution to that. I agree, especially since I own DraftKings stock. So I want as many states to legalize sports betting as possible. In fact, DraftKings, we'll talk about stocks in a minute, but DraftKings is the only stock I'm really holding on to in that day trading portfolio. Fred, a robust economy will dramatically raise revenue for the state of Connecticut. Well, Connecticut's economy is in bad shape. Wall Street numbers are good. But Connecticut economy has been propped up significantly by unemployment payments. Those $600 were huge. People are still getting unemployment in the restaurant industry, in the entertainment industry, in theater, in all the leisure and travel industries. Connecticut is being propped up by the federal government. That's why a stimulus is so important to Connecticut. In fact, the Connecticut Mirror, let me look this up. Connecticut Mirror article dated November 11th by Keith Phaneuf. Connecticut ranks last in personal income growth over the last year. And there was one. Yeah, the State Department of Labor is still paying about 207,000 jobless benefits weekly. And companies likely will lay off workers this winter as they move past their initial pandemic shock and reevaluate positions. This translates to economic stagnation at best. So it's interesting. The state, its reserves have gone significantly up, but the strength of the economy has gone down. The reserves have gone up because rich people have made a lot of money in the market. If you put money anywhere on March 18th, which was the bottom of the market, you made 5 times your money on Tesla. You put money in anything, especially the tech stocks, you did great. You did phenomenal. So the people making the most money, those capital gains taxes, high level of income taxes, they're doing well. That has money coming in. But a strong economy is based on the movement of money. People have to be spending money to have a strong economy. That additional $600 was so valuable to people because when people don't have money and you give them $600, they will spend it. If somebody's worth $500,000 and they're doing okay and their house is mostly paid for and there's no significant bills, you give them $600, they're going to put it in the bank. But you give $600 to somebody who does not have a lot of money, a waitress that worked, or somebody who worked at a movie theater, or someone that worked in travel industry, doesn't have a ton of savings. They're spending that $600. It's going to restaurants. It's going out for gas. It's going all of those things. That pushes and boosts up the economy. That $600 is gone. And soon the underlying unemployment benefits will be gone. So the people who are making the most money during this shutdown, during COVID, are the wealthy who don't have a massive incentive to spend it. So they're paying some taxes, but they're not contributing to a strong economy because they're not promoting the movement of money. If no stimulus package comes and no extension of those unemployment benefits comes, Connecticut's in awful, awful shape. Terrible shape. It has been masked because of those packages, because of the federal government. A lot of people are still on unemployment. And as much as a lot of people are back to work, those in entertainment, restaurants, they're just getting crushed. Absolutely crushed. And so every time we hear another restaurant, even if it closes down temporarily, 2 weeks because of a COVID, positive test, they're closing down to clean or what have you, those workers, no work for 2 weeks. Those workers aren't rich. They're not people who have reserves sitting around, especially after 7, 8 months of this mess. Connecticut's in bad shape. So that's what Sean Scanlon will inherit. An absolute need to raise money somehow. So there can be some functional decisions to be made. Is it sales tax? Is it more fees? Is it income tax? Have the income taxes that come in helped offset everything? Well, we don't know. Is there spending that should be cut? When Stefanowski ran, he said, well, I'm going to go in and I'm going to be able to save 10%. And everybody said, how are you going to do it? And he goes, almost as a joke. And it was, oh, of course we'll be able to save 10%. We can always save 10%. Then say it. How are you going to do it? Here's my new proposal. If you propose cuts, you also have to look the people in the eye that you're going to cut. A couple years back when Matt Hoey was running, I moderated the debate between Matt Hoey and I forgot his name. He was a really good guy, really into numbers in finance. And he talked about ways to save money, but he never really gave a specific answer. Well, we can get a better interest rate here. We can get and part of in that debate that we had to ask was, hold on a second. Town employees deserve to know if they're going to have jobs if you're elected. So if you want to come in and say, let's reduce staffing 10%, okay, that's all right. That may be legit, but you have to tell us what departments. You want to go, and I hear this word a lot, zero-based budgeting. How? You want to go down to zero? So a lot of times when you, for example, in Brantford, when Big Y took over for A&P, they came in and basically fired everyone and made everyone interview for their jobs. They hired back a bunch of people. They went back to zero. Everybody interviewed for their jobs. What impact do you think that would have on the state? Ken McKenzie, yeah, good guy, very good guy. And he's the kind of guy, I sat and talked to him, I think, for an hour and a half. Very good guy. Never really gave specifics. And if you're running for office, you should have specific. You can't just keep repeating, we're going to cut, we're going to cut, we're going to cut, we're going to cut. What are you going to cut? You're going to cut somebody in town clerk's office. You're going to cut somebody in this department. Let us know. It doesn't mean we're all going to fight for that person's job. Sometimes cuts should happen. Good business people make cuts. It's sometimes better for the company, better for the town, better for the government to make cuts. But you can't hide from telling us what those cuts would be. And this idea of zero-based budgeting sounds good on paper. But there are things that have to stay continuous. Zero-based budgeting, let's go back to zero and see what we need. Okay, but we need to have a functional government. So we know that. We know we need to have social services. We know that. That's 95%. So do you want to make those services less? Okay, what areas? What groups? What income brackets would you cut back? And everybody always says, well, we're going to cut waste. Yeah, everybody's trying to cut waste. We have people trying and looking for waste. But the budget's public. You have access to it. By the time you decide to run for office, give me some specifics, maybe not everything, but some specifics. I would cut this. We had what was a presidential race where the guy wanted to cut the Department of Education? The governor from Texas wanted to cut some key departments and couldn't remember the education one, I think. But at least he had specific things he wanted to cut. He made a fool of himself in not remembering what he wanted to cut, but at least he had, we're going to cut this. Okay. But so often they hide from that. We hide behind these bumper sticker policies, right? We're going to cut taxes. We're going to find savings. Or we're going to reduce things. No, you give me specifics. Tell me who it is. And so now Scanlon goes from being somebody who can work with both sides and work on issues that really a lot of people support to now being the face of what can be tax increases. That could be a positive politically, a big step up, a lot more responsibility, or it could be a negative if he has future political goals. How he handles this is going to be huge, and we'll be watching that closely. He's a good guy, a very smart guy. And I will tell you this, from my experience, honest. Now, I'll take someone I drastically disagree with, I'll take somebody honest that I disagree with over somebody dishonest and putting smoke up people's ass. Scanlon has never done that. Granted, he hasn't run, he hasn't had opponents in a lot of these races. Jonathan Lamont is also hoping a Biden presidency will bring aid to all states to replace revenue. You're absolutely right. And so we're going to get a very good indication of that in the next month. So this runoff election in Georgia is everything. Right now, more important than the presidential race is this runoff in Georgia because it's about who controls the Senate. So the last proposal for a stimulus package was $2.2 trillion from Pelosi. The Republicans passed a $500 billion one, $500 billion. I would guess if the Democrats win Georgia, they have to win both seats. And it's no small task. They're big underdogs to begin. Well, let's suppose Democrats win that. I bet that stimulus package gets to $3.5–4 trillion. I bet everybody gets $600 back. That $1,200 payment gets paid, and it may be higher. You may have back pay on the $600. There's going to be state aid coming in for state governments, for local governments. There's going to be a lot of things that happen. It will pass quickly, no questions asked. If the Republicans win that, then Mitch McConnell gets to determine what he wants. And so, who knows? And so they're looking at these employment numbers and saying our numbers are kind of going in the right direction. Wall Street's going in the right direction. The economy seems to be turning around. And I think the economy is turning around for about 90% of the country. Things are doing well. A lot of people are doing fine. But that 10%, it's like, what is it, Jenga? Where you have everybody stacked on top and then you start taking out 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%. And you lose those people, the economy will crash. We saw this with the housing market, right? Most people were paying on their houses. But if only a small percentage defaulted on those loans, the whole fund would fall apart. That's the risk we face right now as a country. So if Pelosi and McConnell can actually talk about a stimulus package now, it'll tell us a lot. But if they don't, and we wait till after that election in Georgia, if Democrats win, it'll be huge. If Republicans win, it'll either be zero or small. That $1,200 payment in their last plan didn't exist. The extension of unemployment benefits, I don't believe was in their $500 billion plan. I heard one that had $300 per week, but I don't believe it was in their plan. Listen, if it were me, extending those unemployment benefits even larger would be my first priority because it's essentially a stimulus package. When you give people who don't have money cash, they spend it. And a strong economy is based on the movement of money, not the net worth of the highest earners. A strong economy is based on people spending money. Therefore, if I was giving Sean Scanlon advice about a tax plan, lower the income tax rate on the lowest people, up to 30, 40,000, lower the income tax rate on that bracket. Have it more progressive as we go up. The people who don't have it to pay, putting an extra couple $100 a year, an extra $1,000 a year in their pocket will be a stimulant to the economy. And right now, Connecticut needs it. So I wish him well. He's a friend. We've had him on here. I want him to do phenomenally. And if he needs help in pushing forward a good idea, I'd be glad to have a conversation on this podcast and talk to the state about it if we could. Hopefully in the next 6 months, this podcast is statewide and we can do a little bit more. We're going to spend some money promoting that. But that's the issue facing our state right now. That's the issue facing our country. In our state, because that's the headline in the Connecticut Mirror. Read it one more time. Connecticut ranks last in personal income growth over past year. And that has even been masked by that $600 payment. If there's no stimulus soon, Connecticut is in serious, serious trouble. And that's just what the math tells us. Okay, thanks for the comments today, guys. When you comment and have ideas and questions, it helps because we can have a back and forth. We can share ideas. It's okay, and I want you to question what I'm saying. We want that. We want a discussion. What we don't want is lunacy. If you're coming in here with conspiracy theories, and it's not helpful. Having a real conversation, and I have these conversations every day. I lean left, but I have Republican friends that I'm very close to and we have strong conversations, significant disagreements. But when you're comparing the merits of an argument, then it's a constructive discussion. When you're coming in with either bumper stickers, no new taxes, or, we'll leave the state, that kind of stuff, or you're coming in with conspiracy theories, with Obamagate or something like that was coming up, that's not helpful to intelligent conversation. Certainly not what we're trying to do on the podcast. So I appreciate that you came on today. I appreciate that you're giving me your time. I very much appreciate that you're interacting and engaging in hopefully what is a different type of conversation. I don't want to be Rush Limbaugh. I don't want to be, I could do a podcast called "What Am I Mad About Today?" and just do a rant. It will get more viewers. People love that crap. I don't want to do it. I think there's more people in the end that want an honest, logical conversation about ideas. And I want to thank you all for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow at 4:00. Thanks again for joining me tonight, and hopefully you have a great evening. I'll see you tomorrow at 4:00. Have a great night, guys.